Hello, and welcome to Roly Poly Weight Loss. I'm your host, Roly Poly, and welcome to day 31. So, one thing we touched on last time was set point. The articles from Medium and the Washington Post both briefly mentioned it, and now we're going to get into detail. So the first question, of course, is, what is a set point? Very Well Fit gives a pretty straightforward explanation. Set point theory states that the body maintains its weight and body fat level with internal regulatory controls. According to the popular theory, some people have a high setting, meaning they tend to have a naturally higher weight as a set point, while others have a low set point and therefore a naturally lower body weight. So this is what we tend to think of when we think of metabolism. We tend to think, oh, people have a low metabolism, so they are very big. People have a high metabolism, so they're naturally very thin. This is what we're actually talking about is set point, and we're kind of mislabeling it as metabolism. So this is similar to the concept of homeostasis. Homeostasis basically just means stay the same. It's when things want to stay where they are. You might have heard a body at rest wants to stay at rest. That's homeostasis. So this is what keeps your body temperature at the same level and what theoretically keeps your blood sugar levels at normal levels, as well as dozens of other things. How much acid is in your stomach at any time, all that kind of stuff. There are all different kinds of things in your body that are controlled to be kept at a specific homeostasis. Things like how acidic or basic different things are, how much of the different parts of your blood there are, all of these things. So there are all these different kinds of things inside of you that have their own particular homeostasis that your body controls. And so when there's a problem with your body, it'll affect that. So this is what happens when you have a fever and your body temperature rises above where you would normally have it. Or if you're, out in the snow and you get hypothermia and your body lowers its temperature. It goes out of homeostasis. This is what happens when you get diabetes and it throws off your blood sugar homeostasis. If you get sick and your white blood cell count elevates from where it would normally be just cruising in your body. If you have an ulcer or something, and that'll throw off the acid in your stomach. So what we tend to think of is when something goes wrong with your homeostasis. That's when stuff changes. So the theory is that you have a body weight homeostasis that your body wants to maintain. And if you get sick, it is messed up and it can either go high or low. So that is the super, super simplistic explanation. Obviously, something like controlling your body weight is far more complex than controlling, like, the acid in your stomach. So, how this relates to weight. Well, the theory is that just like with temperature and everything else, our bodies have an amount of fat/weight that it comfortably lives at. So if you think back to when we did that body scan and we had different kinds of tissue, lean tissue, fat tissue, there's a certain amount of fat tissue, which translates for us to body weight, that our body wants to have. And all other things being equal, our body will stay at that level of fat tissue or return to that level of fat tissue if it goes in either direction. Now, unlike temperature, where the spot that our homeostasis wants to go to is very narrow. It's literally just 1 exact degree is where we want to be at all times, in theory. With weight, it's generally considered to be like a 10 to 15 pound range. So it's more like the thermostat in your house, where you might have it set to where if it goes below 60, turn the heat on. If it goes above 75, turn the AC on. So you have this range from 60 to 75 where you want your house to be most of the time, and unless something goes wrong and it has to kick in one of those systems, top or bottom, it'll come back to that range, ideally. So that's a little easier way to think of weight as being a range that our body wants to be in. So that's the idea. According to this journal article that's archived in the National Library of Medicine, the set point theory assumes a strong genetic and humoral control of body weight characterized by a proportional feedback system designed to control body weight. So that's a very complex way of saying it. But basically what they're saying is genetics and hormones kind of combine, and that's your nature and nurture type, combine to create this body weight range. And there's a feedback system in our body that is composed of different chemicals and hormones and whatnot, so that if we go low or we go high, it kicks that thermostat in and tries to go back to where it wants to be. That's basically what they're saying. And the main logic behind this is based on animal studies. So they did this study where they took rats off of their usual normal diet and made them eat more or less. And they gained or lost weight respectively. And then they let the rats just eat their normal diet again. And their weight went right back to where it had been. They didn't need any medicine or extra exercise or anything else. It just, boop, went back to normal. Which, you know, sounds very promising. But animal studies don't always perfectly translate to human studies. And in this particular case, there's a really good reason for that. As the journal notes, in humans, the proof of the matter mainly refers to observational data obtained in large populations, as well as to interventions in normal weight subjects and in obese patients. By contrast, rigorously well-controlled experiments addressing body weight homeostasis in humans rarely exist. And Psychology Today also notes that other evidence for a set point grew out of human data that when people gain or lose weight, i.e. the system is perturbed, the body seems to defend the original weight. That is why, after a weight loss, there is a tendency for many people to regain the lost weight. There is, though, an asymmetry in this process, namely that the body seems to defend against weight loss far more effectively than against weight gain, probably as an evolutionary advantage when food cycles were more variable. So, there has been research into what causes this feedback loop that controls this homeostasis. But they haven't reached a consensus yet on exactly what and how it works. And part of that is because there are several different chemicals and hormones in our bodies that are tied to weight gain and weight loss and feelings of hunger and feelings of fullness and all of those things. And there are others like stress cortisol that can affect those ones. It's hard to pin down the exact system that's at play. And as they noted, we aren't really doing a lot of human studies on this. We aren't really developing these really refined studies of plonking humans in a lab and testing their weight homeostasis. And as we're going to get into more detail soon, rats don't exactly have, supermodel rats on the covers of magazines telling them they should be a different weight than their body naturally wants to be. So humans aren't necessarily inclined to stay at our homeostasis place if it doesn't fit what society tells us it should. Um, so, since there are all these questions about how homeostasis actually works and what exactly controls it in the body, and some people are questioning, does it actually happen at all? Is this all just anecdotal evidence? Well, Very Well Fit asks this question. While there is some disagreement about the validity of set point theory, researchers find that there is something to it. Fortunately, set point is not the same thing as destiny. According to the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center at Harvard, your hereditary and your environment, starting back at the moment of your conception, determine your set point. Over the long term, excess food and insufficient exercise will override your body's natural tendency to stay at its set point and lead to a higher, less healthy set point. So the set point can change. And like I said, we also run into the problem that humans are more complex than rats, motivationally speaking. Some scientists studied obesity-prone rats and noted metabolic factors in rats are easier to study because there are not contaminating human motivational factors, e.g. peer pressure to be thin, wishes for an ideal physique. These researchers found that there was a metabolic propensity for their rats to regain weight after a period of caloric restriction and subsequent weight loss, both by an increased appetite and a decrease in resting metabolic rate. But because humans have all these other factors, it's tricky to study our set point system in isolation. There's not as much evidence for it as we would like, but there's definitely evidence that it's there. And as Psychology Today notes, the regulation of fat accumulation in humans is very complicated and determined by genetic, gender, perinatal, developmental, dietary, environmental, neural, and psychosocial factors. And psychosocial there at the end, that's all of the societal stuff. So, speaking of all those internal and external factors, you might think that our obesity epidemic is proof that set point theory doesn't exist. But there's a logical explanation for that too. We are currently like the mice that are eating the unhealthy food and not running in their little wheels, and thus are gaining weight. But if we go back to a healthy little d diet and become more active, we should, like the mice, return to our set point. Now the problem is some people's set point is not what they want it to be, and that's when they start big D dieting to get lower than their set point. And that is where we run into problems. If you can be at your set point and be happy at your set point, then you can just stay there in your little homeostasis bubble and be fine. Now, that said, there are life events that can shift our original set point to a different level, often higher. So rather than being permanently fixed, the weight set point is influenced by several environmental factors and can change. For example, the average palatability or desirability of one's food is important, with chronic consumption of more palatable food generally resulting in a higher weight set point. Because of this, people tend to change weight when the food environment changes. For example, when students go off to college. Because all of a sudden, you don't have a parent there saying you have to eat your vegetables, you can just have cake all the time. And this is certainly what happened to me. As I will get into very shortly. But yeah, that going away to college is often a big point. That's why it's literally a cultural reference point of the freshman 10 or the freshman 15, depending on what you hear. That, freshmen go off to school and their food environment completely changes and they gain weight. So this is certainly, like I said, certainly a familiar story for a lot of people. And then another factor that the Obesity Action Coalition lists, stress is also an important factor, with most people maintaining lower body weights when faced with chronic stress. In contrast, some individuals tend to eat more food and gain weight in certain stressful situations. And this is often known as the comfort food phenomenon, in which certain foods provide relief from stress. Excessive exercise can also lower the average amount of body fat carried. So, one of those cursing your genetics things. I am one of those people who does not lose weight when they're stressed. I'm one of those people who eats comfort food when they're stressed. So I gain weight. So when I am stressed over a long period of time, I have gained this weight over a long period of time, that can change your set point. Similarly, if you're the kind of person who loses weight when you're stressed, that can lower your set point if you're stressed for a long period of time. Now, that's not a great way to go about dieting because stress has a lot of other negative impacts on your body, but it can change your set point. So again, that's something that makes sense. We've heard that in common, cultural knowledge, that you can lose weight or gain weight when you're stressed. Makes sense. And that over a long period of time, it can affect your set point. And if you think about it, stress cortisol, it's just one more part of our internal system. It makes sense that it can rewire our weight thermostat and change the set point to a different number. If it's part of the feedback loop that controls our weight in the first place, which it might be, it's already wired into the system to begin with. So, that said, set point theory, likely to be true, not fully proven how it works yet. But if it is true, and it does work, there's a downside, which is that if we lose weight temporarily, like with a big D diet, it will likely come right back, as many yo-yo dieters know well. So, the Obesity Action Coalition sums it up. As attention to maintaining the lost weight decreases, body weight creeps back up, generally to about the same level as occurred before the dieting began. This discouraging outcome may occur several times for some individuals throughout their lifetime as they keep attempting to lose weight, i.e., they try one or another diet that is popular at the time, lose some weight, and then regain it throughout a period of weeks or months. So, we all know this is yo-yo dieting. So, that's the downside. There's an upside, though. If our brain has already shifted our set point in the past, for example, when we went away to college, or when our body changed because of our food environment to a new higher level or a stress environment, and all of a sudden, instead of us maintaining 180 without trying, we're now maintaining 200 without trying. Our body's already done that in the past. It's moved our set point. Well, that means it can move it again. It might be able to shift it to a lower spot. So, the question comes, have you ever hit a plateau? Were you at one weight for a while before something changed in your life and your weight shifted up or down to a new plateau? This is an example, most likely, of a shifting weight set point. I can look back at my history and I can identify these moments in my own past. So, what this means is that we can, theoretically, rewire our set point to a different number and stop the yo-yo. So, for example, the Obesity Action Coalition discusses data that shows that this very thing happens after any kind of bariatric or stomach surgery. Appetite is initially reduced and body weight/fat declines throughout time. However, body weight does not keep going down indefinitely. Rather, as less food is eaten, body weight keeps declining until it settles at a new, much lower, and much healthier level. And once that lower plateau is attained, food intake returns to near normal. Interestingly, symptoms of diabetes mellitus also start improving soon after the surgery, with many individuals seeing normal blood sugar levels long before significant weight is lost. So, what that means is that this is evidence that rather than getting your stomach stapled or getting one of those little balloony things, rather than that acting like a crash diet where we're going to yo-yo back up, bariatric surgery can actually reset our weight set point to a lower level. Okay? And not just our weight set point, but it seems like it'll reset your diabetes blood sugar set point too if you have type 2. And this can last for 20 years or more. So that is not a yo-yo diet. That is a new weight set point and a lower one. Now, without bariatric surgery, is it possible to reset your weight set point? Possibly. Is it going to be probably like the 100 pounds like weight loss surgery? No. Something more like a freshman 15? More likely. But this shows that it is possible. If it can set up, it can set down. We just have to figure out the mechanism behind it. So, that is all the scientific stuff. Why scientists think that set point is a thing and how it works and whatnot. So now I'm going to give you my personal reasons for thinking that set point is a thing. And this is what I talked about before, that I would get into my personal weight loss journey. It's going to cover some, again, to use the word, but it's going to cover some really personal stuff, including my struggles with eating disorders. So, as I mentioned, hang on. So, as I mentioned before, I have been overweight since high school, but this wasn't the case when I was a kid. I had that stereotypical kid metabolism where I could eat whatever I want and I was still thin, and scrawny thin. And then I hit puberty and I started gaining weight. Particularly, I started gaining hips. All the ladies in our family have hips. The boys are stick thin their whole lives, and the women all have hips. And 50-50 of us are pears, and 50-50 of us are hourglasses. But we all have hips. And this is kind of inevitable. This is the genetic part of it. But I started getting these hips/thighs in high school. And like a good decision-making teenager, I decided that I could stop this by becoming anorexic or bulimic. And I did this knowing that it was bad for you and it would cause all kinds of problems. But I also knew that before it caused the worst of those problems, it made you lose weight. So, like a good decision-making teenager, I thought this was an acceptable trade-off. Unfortunately, this first attempt at dieting, capital D, failed for 2 reasons. Probably 3 if you consider that anorexia and bulimia don't work. But I failed because I couldn't properly make myself throw up. So I failed at being bulimic. I could binge but not purge. And I couldn't make it to the end of the day without eating. So I failed at being anorexic. So I would go without food for as long as possible, all day. And then I would binge when I couldn't last any longer. And this was usually after school or on the commute home, meaning I was eating convenience store, candy, soda, fast food, that kind of thing. So, you know, the worst kind of thing was my main, if not only, meal of the day. So, I can look back and say, you know, pinpoint the variety of bad decisions in this plan. But at the time, again, teenagers make such good decisions. This is what I thought would help. So, instead of getting rid of the family hips that weren't going to go anywhere anyway, I just gained a boatload of weight and destroyed all of my metabolic, chemical, hormonal, you know, etc. systems in my body. You know, looking back, if I hadn't done that, Could my set point have been relatively low, but just with the family hips? Possibly. There are certainly women in my family who are built that way, but I'll never know. So then, of course, I went to college. I had given up on losing weight through failed eating disorders, and I just kind of lived off of Mountain Dew and the all-you-can-eat student cafeteria. So I had maintained my binge principle, but not the waiting all day to eat it. It was just all the time. And again, Pop-Tarts, Mountain Dew, all that kind of stuff that's staple of American college diet. So, upon graduating, I was 5'4", and I weighed 180 pounds, which on a BMI chart is right over the line of being obese instead of just overweight. And I started exercising at a gym, but I only went like once a week maybe, and I was doing the really wimpy, like, again, I can't actually do a push-up, I can't actually lift weights. It was mostly just elliptical, and then I'd putter in the pool for a little bit, and then I'd sit in the hot tub for half an hour. Like that kind of going to the gym. And I started trying to eat more fruits and veggies, but I later learned that I had been way, way off in my eyeballing of portion sizes. So on pretty much all my food. So, for example, I was like, well, I'll add peas to my Kraft mac and cheese, and that'll make it healthier. So I'll have a cup of Kraft mac and cheese, which was really like 2.5 cups in that container. Looking back on it, I have learned. And then I will add like half a cup of peas, which I again eyeballed. So again, it was more like a third or a quarter cup of peas in 2.5 cups of mac and cheese. But in my mind, it was a 2 to 1. I had, 1 pea for every 2 mac and cheese. Brilliant. Again, no longer a teenager, but early 20-something decision making on eyeballing portions is not much better than teenager decision making. So, in trying to count calories, I was way low on all my calories then. Classic mistakes. But, here's the interesting part. Barely exercising, badly. Counting calories, badly. I went down from 180 to 150 pounds in under a year. And I stayed there for over a year without really trying. Minimal effort on my part. Still eating mac and cheese and donuts and soda. I was still drinking Mountain Dew all the time. All of that. So to me now, looking back, it seems pretty clear that that plateau was a set point. That in that 130 to 150 or 180 to 150 range was a set point for me. That I had gone over and I came back down. And just moderately more active, moderately better eating. Just dropped 30 pounds, less than a year. Boom. And I maintained that, again, with minimal effort for over a year. Then I went on to grad school, which was very stressful. And as I've already mentioned, I'm a comfort eater who gains weight when I'm stressed. And my food habits tanked and my exercise became minimal. And in 2 years, I was back up past 180 to 230. Now, some people might think this was a yo-yo. I went down from 180 to 150 and then yo-yoed back up to 230. And it might have been. But that would generally imply that I had been actively, strenuously losing weight at that 150 point, which I was certainly not doing for that year and a half. Regardless, I attempted in my 3rd year of grad school to incorporate more activity by taking dance and swim classes, and I plateaued at that 230. And I held that plateau for a year of grad school and the first year after it, again with no effort, even less effort than the first time. I held that plateau. So could this have just been the top of the yo-yo? Maybe. Could it have been a new reset set point? Also maybe. And then I got a really stressful job, and despite my best efforts to be more active and to eat better, including trying acupuncture and trying seeing a chiropractor and various diets, big D, and walking 5Ks and all of this, I gained more weight. And here I did yo-yo. I very definitely yo-yoed between 220 and 250 for the course of that 4 to 5 years. And I eventually ended up at 270, right around when I left that job. Which you will note is shortly before I started roly-poly weight loss. That 270 where I started. So, if set point theory is real, am I currently just on a high from my old 230 set point? Or am I at a new set point in the 270 range? I don't know. Obviously, I'm hoping for the former. It means I will come back down to 230 relatively easily. I suspect, though, it's not going to be that easy. I suspect it's the latter. And again, there are all kinds of factors that can affect us and that can affect how our bodies and brains calibrate what our weight thermostat should be set to. Could my medications or my working nights, weird melatonin, or my change in stress be factors? Certainly. Could I work really hard to capital D diet and exercise more and then just yo-yo again? Of course. Could I make some minor adjustments and find that I naturally sink back to a lower set point? Possibly. Hopefully. But I think it's clear that set points are a real possibility for us. There's certainly scientific evidence to support this, even if we don't understand them fully. And I think anecdotally, many people will find that there were plateaus in their life. We called them plateaus that really might have been set points. If our life had stayed the same, or if we had not pushed for a lower point, we could have stayed at that same set point for many, many years. That potentially, when I was 150, I had been told that BMI-wise, I should have been at 120. So I was aiming for that badly, aiming for that. I could have been happy at 150. I would love to be at 150 now because I've been so much higher. But even when I was at that set point, society was telling me I had to be lower. So it's something to think about. And I think it's really interesting to go back through your own personal history and look at where you might have had set points or plateaus. And this is important because set point theory might be a way to break the yo-yo dieting cycle that many of us fall into. If you can find your set point and, maintain your set point, then your body will be happier. It'll be in homeostasis, which is what it always wants to be. And you'll find that with minimal effort, you can maintain that point. Now, that might not be the point you want to be at. And that's when you look into how to make changes without capital D dieting. And that's where we look at things like how this bariatric surgery might actually, change set points. Or how reducing the stress in your life might change a set point. Or just changing your general activity level, but not becoming completely obsessed with capital D dieting and exercising constantly to the point where that's all you're thinking about, because that is a diet and that will yo-yo you. But looking at maintaining set points or resetting set points could be a very interesting way to healthily lose weight or maintain weight. If you can diet and then reset your set point so that you do not yo-yo back up, that kind of thing that we have to, that we should look at. I think it's interesting to go back and look at where your set point might have been or be. But breaking the cycle, that's a discussion for another day because we are out of time. I made it to 30 today. And through the cool down. So, This has been Roly Poly Weight Loss. As always, I am your host, Roly Poly. Use the hashtag WeightSetPoint to share your opinions about set points and homeostasis. And if you feel comfortable, share any examples you might have. And please join me next time.